I thank Bleach India Foundation for giving me this opportunity to chair a session. So the session right now, the sixth session is Indian Sacred Art, Murals, and Narrative Paintings. So may I invite the first speaker, Dr. Shivangi Naithani Devrani.
Good morning to one and all, and I thank Preach India Foundation for giving me this platform, such a prestigious platform, and thank you to the chair session. So, as I delve into this stories of Janmasakhi, now these are sacred stories in color. My title talks about, and Janmasakhi painting as a visual narrative in Sikh art. Now, art has always had a relationship between devotion and experience, and this is where images do more than what they represent. They talk about their spiritual presence, as talked about W.G. Archer. He's an art historian. Now, where do I situate it in the larger Sikh tradition? These Janamsakhi paintings. So, in the Sikh tradition, which is shaped largely by the teachings of Guru Nanak and the nine Gurus, the connection between devotion and art first came through the illumination of the sacred manuscripts that are there, the scriptural text. This is from the scriptural devotion in the visually expressed and gradually then turning into the narrative art through the Janamsakhis. Now, Janamsakhi, to give it in one answer, because I'll be delving it in the origin and talking about an elaboration, is the accounts of Guru Nanak and its teaching. Now, this is where the images goes beyond the depiction, turning Guru's life and the message into a living devotional experience. Now, scriptural and manuscript illumination, I'll be talking in a very concise manner just to have a connective story that where do Janamsakhi situate in this formation of the visual tradition and Sikh visual tradition, basically. So, development of visual expression, as mentioned by K.K. Malhotra, is an historian. He says Sikh's interest in painting first appeared in scriptural text. So, scriptural text somehow founds the foundation and the root of illumination of the sacred text, where manuscript culture are the primary medium. Basically, these are the handwritten copies of Guru Granth Sahib, which is also revered as a living guru itself. Right? So, the artistic tradition in these manuscripts were the decorative margins, the illumination, and the ornamentation that it starts. So in the early 17th or the 16th century, there's an example of the Govindwal Pothi also. So these pothis are the hymns, and these were somehow being collaborated before we see the manuscript that is Guru Granth Sahib coming up. So the stylistic development in the 17th century, we see that first they are the geometric patterns, which were the influence of that time's Islamic influence. Now, from that, how the evolution of decorative aesthetics has taken place. So, transition from decorative to a floral motif, illuminating of the hukumnamas. Now, hukumnamas were the commands or the orders of the gurus that were there. So, these were basically non-representational work of art if we situated in the Sikh visual culture. Then we have the nishans. These are the signs and the signature of the guru. So, here is an example of the nishan of the Guru Gobind Singh here. So you can see the floral motifs that are there, how they are decorated, illuminated basically. And this is the nishan of Guru Gobind Singh. So there was a sense of art and the visual culture that starts prevailing. Now Sikh art begins with manuscript, but it becomes visual through Janamsakhi illustrations. Now Janamsakhis were oral to textual tradition, then they turn into the visual narratives. Following into this tradition, if we talk about the Sikh art to culminate it, the Sikh cultural interaction became more influenced largely with the influence of the Mughal, the Rajput, and the Pahadi tradition, and ultimately the integration of Kashmiri floral styles in the 18th century. And finally, if we talk about in the larger sense, the patronage and artistic consolidation under the expansion of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And later, these artists who were living in the region of Punjab, they migrated from the regions of Kangra, Guler, and the regional centers in the Punjab. So this is how we established, and this is how I situate Janamsakhi into it. So this is one of the earliest pothis that we can see where the scripture is there. So there is not a there's no colors into it. This is one of the earliest example that we have. This is where the story related to Guru Nanak has been depicted, represented. So Janamsakhi, what are they? What does the name suggest? So Jan, these are the life stories. Sakhi is the eyewitness or the testimony. So Jan Sakhis are the hagiographic narratives of Guru Nanak's life. They emerged from oral memory and community narratives. Largely, the surviving manuscript that we see is spanning from somewhere 1680 to late 19th century. Now, अगर इसका textual significance देखें, they are written in Gurumukhi. But the earlier reference sometimes we find in by Dr. Pyare Singh, he says the earliest document he says contest is Janamsakhi is from 1588, but generally largely what we find manuscript is spanning from this. Now, Dr. W.H. McLeod, he is an art historian, he says that Janamsakhis are hagiographic accounts of the life of Guru Nanak. These are popular narratives that enjoy the considerable popularity through the Sikh. But talking about how did they evolve? So this is where the origin, the narrative, how do we talk about what does it mean? So from talking into the oral tradition into the written text that we find, there are multiple Janamsakhi tradition. These are not a single tradition because once it's developed an oral tradition, हर किसी की अपना एक कहानी है गुरु नानक से related, they have seen, what they have experienced. So they are through lineages of Bhaibala, Mirvan, Puratan, Adi traditions that it comes down from. Then how we narrated to the key manuscripts which are important that are there. We have the Bala Janamsakhi, which has 29 folios. Now this is one of the earliest illustrated tradition that we have. It is in the private collection of P.N. Kapoor. He lives in Delhi only. Then we have the Bagarian manuscript. It almost have 42 illustrations. Now these illustration also are not equally same. किसी में कोई कहानी important है, किसी में overlapping कोई कहानी है. Then we have the B40 Janamsakhi. It has 52 illustrations. This is the most elaborate and one of the most important ones in today's scenario. ये British Library में है, the B40 Janamsakhi. Now these are the important later developments में अगर हम जन्मसाखी का वो देखें तो गुलेर सेट आता है which is of a पहाड़ी influence in late 18th century में आता है. Then you have the unbound set of the Company collection. Now Sitendra Company उनकी वाइफ के उसमें ये collection है and this was donated to Asian Art Museum San Francisco. He is the father of the optics, fiber optics. ये उनके उसमें है, ये परिवार में उनके. And then you see the decline of the manuscript production of the Janamsakhi and the paintings because of the starting of the printing press. So this is how we see the evolution that is taking place. Now, as I can't talk about all the manuscript traditions, not all, I've taken B40 Janamsakhi. So B40 Janamsakhi is dating from 1733 CE, located in British Library. It has 57 illustrations. It is significant because it is one of the earliest and most complete illustrated Janamsakhi manuscript that we have. And it also includes date, patron, and even the mention of the artist because many of them fail to have it. Now, what is the visual language and the symbolism in these Janamsakhi if we talk about B40 in particular? Because every illustration has a different way of portraying, different symbolism, very different visual language, and sometimes the stories are also very different if we see. So, spatial composition, the division into the multiple planes, I'll be explaining through few examples because of the limitation of time. I can't show all 57. So, I'll take a few examples that are there. So you in the upper spiritual realm, that is the Parmar, generally you see Guru Nanak is being shown. And in the worldly realm, that is the Lok, is generally somebody who is accompanying him, like Bhai Bala and Mardana. They were the two companions that were generally we seen. One is Muslim and one is Hindu that generally accompany Guru Nanak in his travels that are Udasis. So Guru Nanak placed in the upper elevated position, hierarchical representation that is there. Guru always shown in the central in a larger position. Use of elevation and scale is important in the visual language and how symbolism takes place. Symbolic motif related to in the B40, you have halo for sanctity, tree canopies, spiritual sovereignty, and the prominent use of consistent use of the color red, which is devotion and submission, and white for purity and spirituality that one can see. Further, stylistic differentiation. If we see the Guru Nanak, how he is always shown in the three-quarter view, and others in the profile position. seeking is to he is the main important character in his own life journey in the Janamsakhi it is. We talk about the gaze and the gesture. Guru's gaze extend beyond the scene because these are somewhat spiritual focus. These are about the teachings. These are about devotions, what you want to give beyond these. Just these are not just stories. These have devotion, spiritual teachings, messages of Guru's life. So the raised hand is authority, folded hand in reverence that is shown. So the scene depicts these are doctrinal integration, encounters with aesthetics, rulers, and devotees. You have a lot of scenes where you see different communities interacting with Guru Nanak. There's a dialogue across the tradition that is happening. So this is how we place the visual language and the symbolism. Now, what are the major themes of the Janamsakhi if talking about the B40? Because और सारे tradition में even life stories भी mention होती life stories जैसे कि उनकी उनकी birth की stories हैं उनकी बहन या उनकी mother के साथ बीबी नानकी के साथ there is interaction to that. B40 में ये देखने को नहीं मिलता. B40 में generally teaching which are focused on moral and spiritual teachings embedded indirectly through like conversations, which are actions and moral situations that are there. So, and the second is the Udasis, the travels of Guru Nanak. So, B.N. Goswami and C. Smith in their book, they say these are the journey of enlightenment. These are the Udasis that he do. So, there is one example when he visit to Mecca. This is a Janamsakhi folio. एशियन आर्ट ये कंपानी उससे है ये एग्जाम्पल फ्रॉम द कंपानी कलेक्शन नाउ दिस इज वेयर ही सेज ही इज he's pointing his feet toward Mecca. Now, what is the lesson behind it? The teaching behind it is कि भगवान हर जगह है. He's omnipresent everywhere. मैं वहां फेस करूं, उधर फेस करूं, उल्टा फेस करूं. So Guru Nanak tries to teach through this in parts, and the other person is saying, "Hey, you are having this feet over on this side towards Mecca, and it's not right." So his encounters like this are the indirect teachings and conversations that are. So the Udasis are a very main part of the Janamsakhis, the encounters with diverse religious communities, debates, and the questioning, and search for the spiritual truth. And here, the two important companions with Guru Nanak is Bhai Bala and Bhai Mardana. As I said, these two are there. Then you have the third, the doctrinal themes in visual form, where Guru Nanak's authority as a guru is shown. His question of spiritual lineage and succession is also sometimes shown, which Ajit Randhawa and Guru Arjan shown as the lineage. So that kind of a portrayal is also there. The representation of Sikh identity and its continuity.
No,
Then the philosophical context also. Sometimes the depiction of Kali Yuga, the age of decline, is somewhat also shown. Assertion that Sikh Panth remains unaffected by moral degeneration, sorry. Then I'm taking up two examples from the B40 that are there. Now, as we talked about the visual symbolism and the language, as I said, prominence of the color red, centrality of how Guru Nanak is being shown as the main uh, character in this whole representation that is there. Now, this image is about Guru Baba Nanak practices austerity. Source is British Library, and Alam Chand Raj is supposedly the painter that is there. Now he's practicing austerity. There is a movement between two mounds of earth where the worldly and the transcendental beyond. Here, Bhai Mardana is shown here. So it's in a like a dharti lok pe hai and he's in the transcendental, the Paramatma lok that is there. So symbolism speaks of the fact that the presence or the absence of figures highlight the contrast between human devotion, he is not with him, and the Guru's elevated spiritual state that is here, focusing on him. And you can see the sin function symbolically expressing spiritual discipline and authority through visual composition. So one is this example, and the other is the magnate Baba Nanak and Mardana. So Mardana or Bhai Bala, either generally they are seen in the travels. Again, red becomes prominent as a color, and it's a 2D depiction of this. You can see that Guru Nanak gives a needle to the magnet. Now the story goes like that. He gives it to the magnet. He's a wealthy rich person. We are not supposedly known कि कौन है ये individual identification नहीं है. नाउ इट इज लाइक दैट कि ये नीडल आप ना मुझे अदर वर्ल्ड में देना, आफ्टर लाइफ में देना। ही सेज कि मैं कैसे दूंगा। सो ही सेज कि यहाँ से आपको मतलब पता चलता है आप अपने साथ कुछ नहीं ले जा सकते। सो इफ आई एम गिविंग दिस टू यू एंड आई एम सेइंग आफ्टर लाइफ में हम मिलेंगे, तो वो कहते हैं मैं दूंगा कैसे, बिकॉज आई वुड नॉट कैरी एनीथिंग। ही टीचेस अ लेसन दैट वेल्थ एंड मटेरियल अटैचमेंट यही रह जाएगा, and the renunciation of the wealth visual elements are there of the four flags and accumulated wealth of this magnet, this person who is not a single individual but as a community trying to show कि ज्यादातर लोग या wealthy rich people कौन है. He's the personification of all the other peoples who are accumulating or trying to accumulate wealth. उनके लिए वो है. So this is where you see that the depiction of Guru Nanak as Baba highlights his role as spiritual guide towards the moral awakening of this person. And again, the tree canopy is a symbolism of his spiritual guidance, the protection that is there to this factor. So, with this two example, I come to the conclusion of how Janamsakhi evolves from an oral to textual to illustrated narrative manuscripts and illustration. These transform the life of Guru Nanak into visual narratives. Manuscript like B40 shows the integration of text. You can see there is text and there is imagery. So the amalgamation and the integration takes place. And the emergence of distinct Sikh visual language. The visual elements about composition, symbolism, what are the gesture, function as a doctrinal expression, very important to these Janamsakhi. So Janamsakhi translate devotion into image, where sacred narratives become the visual form that communicate spiritual ideas, reinforce identity, and preserve cultural memory that is there. And with this, I come to an end of my slide. And with the blessings of Guru Nanak, I end. And this is where he seeks us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for patiently listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Shivangi. That was very educational, very instructive. So, may I now invite the next speaker, Dr. Agroneel Mandal.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. Hi, I am Agroneel Mandal. Yeah, so today I'm going to speak about the topic on the iconographic and stylistic analysis of Galtaji temple murals, mainly focusing on two mural panels, conversing like Payohari conversing with Balabai and the sages of Galta mural panels. So my research paper aims to investigate the two Q mural panels at the Galtaji temple complex belonging to 18th century and mid-19th century respectively. Through this research, I aim to analyze the mural's aesthetic, symbolic, and historical significance within Galtaji temple complex of Jaipur. It also aims to bring the murals of Galtaji into larger and broader discourse in the field of Jaipur School of Frescoes. The site also lacks conservation and the conditions of the murals which are degrading day by day. My methodology involves extensive on-site documentation, utilizing various vantage points, including bird's eye views to capture the most accessible areas of the complex. This primary data was then synthesized with art historical analysis and an investigation into secondary textual sources. Despite the significant challenge of limited existing literature, I gained broader insights through a detailed iconographic study and interviews with matter experts. Galtaji Temple Complex is located in the east of Jaipur and southwest of Amir. It is situated in the picturesque valley of the Aravali Ranges. The etymology of Galtaji was derived from the name of Rishi Galava or Rishi Galab, who did penance here. Since 16th century, this site served as one of the major religious sites of Jaipur. There are several distinct temples and kunds or holy water tanks, and among them only two are operational, like just in this right hand side picture you can see, and along some other non-religious architecture serving as quarters, cenotaphs, and retreats. Since 18th century, these sites have been developed and painted with murals on their respective walls. The architecture. There are mainly two temples and two cenotaphs which have open access for murals. This includes Sitaramji temple on the right and the Gyan Gopalji temple on the left. These temples were constructed in heavily like architecture. The murals were painted in the exterior and interior walls, including the niches, alcoves, facades, and other sites. Since 18th century, the vogue of Havelis came into being, such as Jaipur witnessed massive temples were constructed in Haveli-like architectures. In similarity, Gyan Gopalji temple and Sitaramji temple were constructed in similar manner. So here are some examples of the murals. We observe an influence of folk, Rajput, Mughal, and European styles. They were mostly painted in Jaipuri fresco, also called as Alagila or Araish, a kind of fresco buono. Themes of these murals include religious narratives incorporating stories from Ramayana, just like on the right bottom corner, you can see one of the murals from there. Dasha avatars, sages, and other deities, secular narratives like that I have presented over here, and other daily life and royal events. So my main research paper mainly focuses on these two mural panels. That is Balabai conversing with Payo Hariji, painted around late 18th century to early 19th century, painted on the exterior wall of the Gyan Gopalji temple that I have just showed to you. And the second panel will be the Sages of Galta, painted in mid 19th century, painted on the interior triangular niche of the cenotaph adjacent to the Zanana Kund. These two murals that I have opted for are significant relation to the Galtaji's history, its narrative as a religious site, and to review its geography visually in painted narratives. So I have just taken the details from the last vertically compressed composition of this. Here we can see that two characters are there. One is Balabai and second is Payohari. And they are in a situation of conversing. Time has faded the panel's original pigment and had the surface of visual signs of unsuccessful restoration attempts. So now here we have the example of Payohari, according to many scholars, including Monica Hausman, Mira Seth, Rosa Maria Cimino, and others, along the religious priest of Galta, that the term Payohari comes from the etymology of Payobhakshi, or the one who only survives by consuming milk. From Horseman essay and the Ramanandis of Galta, she traces this evidence from the Pipa Parichay, written by Anantadas, mentioned in Navadas Bhaktamala, under the Chopais of 38 and 39. It writes, Krishandas, Payohari, was the paragon of renunciation. He had relinquished food and drank only milk. It goes on saying that due to this habit, his skin turned white like milk, and he also became skinny because of his pensive practice. Similarly, in the same source, the third stanza writes Krishandas, who had conquered the Kali age, invited a lion or a tiger, whom he gave of his own flesh to eat. So, probably here we can see the iconographic symbols and the other examples of Payohari that he is already being skinny. It is very much possible through the help of these textual sources and visual iconography that we can consider it as consider him as Payohari. Hence, through these textual sources, Bhaktamala by Navadasji, we can trace a certain mythical yet symbolical iconographic image of Payohari. The tiger itself has some folk affinities in Rajasthani miniature traditions. The way tigers have been depicted, it suggests a regional flavor. Its face has a human-like expression rather than a feline or a tiger-like creature affinities. So here on this page also we can see some examples from the Jain paintings that I have mentioned over here. It is because just to show the affinities or the physical similarities that were painted. These paintings are from the Ashodha Charitra of the Jain painting miniature paintings, and they are undated also. So I recently discovered them in the recent Marg's edition on the Jain paintings. So I have found some similarities, and I do believe that it might have been belonging to the same date that I have marked here. In the mid 16th century, the Vaishnava saint Payohari replaced the Nathpanthi seat at Galtaji, converting King Prithviraj Singh first of Amer to Vaishnavism. Key to this transition was the king's wife Balabai Apurva Devi, a devout disciple of Payohari who acted as a catalyst for her husband's conversion. In this panel, Balabai is depicted as a courtly lady. She wears royal clothing and a Persian Mughal style headgear, reflecting high status. She holds a flower or a petal-like pattern near her chest, suggesting a receptive spiritual state. A camel below her signifies her royal connection and the traditional royal vehicle of Rajasthan. The painting captures the natural landscape and socio-political shifts of Galtaji through the Jaipuri fresco style. Two ponds likely sacred kunds feature lotuses that symbolizes Lord Vishnu, while the raw suggestive brushwork of the mountains creates a sense of terrain without the fine detail. In the upper left, a Haveli-style architecture hints at a temple or a palace. Ultimately, this mural serves as a vital resource and record for the Galtaji's origin, documenting a transformative moment in Amer's religious history through a simplified, expressive vocabulary. The Sages of Galta, this mural panel depicts the Sages of Galta, and it also shows the nature, flora, and fauna of the site. It is painted in the interior niche of the central cenotaph or the chhatri attached to the Zanana Kund that I just showed to you initially. towards the southern direction. Painted around 19th to mid 20th century, within one framework, there are separate individual narratives were depicted. It utilizes the triangular space of the interior niche, providing a wide landscape view of Galtaji. The composition is painted in a triangular pyramidal area. From right to left, it shows the same horizontal scenery of the Galtaji landscape. The characters present here are mainly the sages of Galtaji. The panels profoundly represents the rocky terrain of Galta. In its wide horizon, it represents shrubs, trees, and overlapping forms of conical rocks. Through the help of subtly painted road beginning from the right and leading up towards the cape, unfolds the narrative step by step, which is indeed unique and interesting. So here we can see the image of Gomukh painted on the right depicts the real positioning of Galtaji. Even today, the water falls constantly out of its mouth, which is made up of white marble. There are no fixed date for when it was placed, but it could have been a small hole through which the water has dispensed, and later the head of the cow or the Gomukh was placed. Here we see a sage who is standing straight. He balances his body by putting his left foot over the right. His hands are in Anjali Mudra. He wears a brown cloak, rosary beads garland on his neck, and big earrings called kundals in his ears. His face has a beard and his eyes are composed. Just beside his face, there is a text in Dhundari written as Yogi. Through his attire based representation, posture, and textual reference, he is no other than Taranath of the Nathpanthi ascetics. According to Monica Hossman in her essay, she writes that on the wall of the cave of Payohari, which is actually closed right now for everyone, to the right of the opening and facing it in worshipful posture stands a Nath, no doubt Taranath, in a brownish cloak with ascetic hairdo, and the Nath wearing kundal. In this mural panel too, he is portrayed in a similar fashion, just like the textual reference that I have just said. Here we can see the example of Balanan and Shri Acharya. Despite some superficial damage, the figure of Balanan is identifiable by his white garments, beard, and traditional hairband. Seated near Payohari's cave with a rosary, his depiction mirrors a mid 18th century miniature in the New South Wales Art Gallery. As a leader of the Ramanandi military monks, Balanand is a central figure in Galtaji's history, a site famous for its Hanuman temples and resident monkeys. This panel captures his spiritual authority and the site transition into a major religious hub. Here we can see Sri Acharya. He's seated in a side profile posture, but as he turns back his head back, his momentary pause is captured in a position of a sudden turning back, and his torso becomes more visible in comparison to the character seated in the side profile. He is wearing yellow garments and has Ramanandi Lashkari tilaks on his body. The last narrative that is taking place on the left depicts a group of sages who are either discussing or receiving sermons from the sage positioned in the middle. The text beside him writes Bhaskaracharya. It is possible that it is Ramanuja himself, one of the founders of the Ramanandi sects in the Galtaji itself. He himself, because several references, he is called as the same. They are seated in a pyramidal structure expressing a sense of hierarchy. The unnamed disciple of Ramanuja distinctively have very individual characteristics, such as the side portraits are not repetitive, their facial shape and eyes, along with their colored dhotis, are unique and distinct. The posture and hand expression of Askaracharya suggests that he is offering and the palms of his disciples are drawn in a manner if they are receiving. Interestingly, the site where they are seated now houses the Grand Gyan Gopalji temple, which is also a school that provides the education of Sanskrit and Vedic hymns. Through this paper, I have attempted to bring the murals of Galtaji into a broader discourse within Jaipuri frescoes. These paintings and their styles are unique. It certainly followed the tradition of Jaipur frescoes in terms of their process, making, and planning a composition. But what makes this site and its art heritage unique are the nuances that are already present around its surrounding. Through these two mural panels, it recounts the narrative of its genesis over the walls, the depiction of flora and fauna, the sages, and the contemporary livelihood of that period were borrowed from direct observations of daily life. Essence of folk elements, textual references, oral histories, and traditions were taken care of while painting a certain iconography for an image. Compositional sense was not just limited to the quadrilateral surfaces of the walls, but it permeated into non-quadrilateral corners and niches of an architecture. The unique delineated lines and a uniqueness in the drawing, especially the eyes, which suggest an amalgam of Jaipur as well as Kishangarh and schools of painting, Thus, these features and elements make the frescoes of Galtaji unique and create a wider discourse within the context of Jaipur School of Murals. Another major concern in Galtaji today is that it lacks attention towards its heritage management, especially the murals. Many of the murals have been tried to be restored, but with negligence. Some of them were repainted with synthetic colors instead of following the Jaipuri fresco style. Many of the same murals are repainted in a very different composition, lacking the original iconographies. These are my bibliography and the image courtesy. Most of the photographs have been done by me by doing on-site documentation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very nice presentation. And
Thank
again, you have brought into the mainstream focus such an
thank
important fresco in Jaipur, and
Yes, sir.
I'm sure a lot of people will take more interest in that work. So thank you
Yes, sir.
for a very nice presentation. Now,
Thank you,
may
sir.
I
Yeah.
invite the next speaker, Dr. Raghunath Bokil and Janvi Ambulkar.
Good afternoon. I'm Janhavi Ambulkar. I am presenting on the behalf of my team with Mr. Raghunath Bokil. The topic is the case study of murals from Lakshmi Narayan Temple of the Ratnagiri district, Maharashtra. The introduction. The region of the Konkan is a strip land located between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. The earliest epigraphical records, which found in Sopara, the Ashokan edict, where it mentioned as the Aparanta. The history of Konkan has been diverse and vibrant, which could be evident by the historical and archaeological sites and monuments dated scattered across the region. This can be dated back to the Satvahana period. During the ages, various dynasties held over this region, the Satvahana, Kadambas, and the Rashtrakutas. When the region of the Konkan came under the rule of the Maratha, the where temples were built and reconstructed. This include temple of Kankaditya from Kashiri and Mahakali temple, a Divri, which majority of the does not have any inscriptions. This paper focus on the Lakshmi Narayana temple of Bantivre. Bantivre is a small village which located few kilometers from the Dapoli. This is the map of the village, and this is the exact location of the temple. Methodology: the field visit, the photographic documentation of the murals, digital documentation, and the analysis. The Lakshmi Narayan temple is said to have been existent since the last 300 or 400 years. This claim seems to be somewhat accurate. This temple sculptures of Vishnu and Ganpati inside the Garbhagriha, which stylistic resemblance to the sculptures from the Maratha period. This temple consists of the Garbhagriha Mahamandapa, the entire structure above the Mahamandapa. The temple premises also including the stepwells and water channels made out of the laterite stones. This is the picture of the temple. This is the picture of the mandapa. This is the sculptures, the Ganpati, the Vishnu sculptures, and the Nandi. And this is the stepwell. The murals is a piece of the graphic artwork that is painted or applied directly on the wall, ceiling, or the other permanent substract. During the Maratha period, murals started appearing on the walls of the temples as a part of the decorative elements, as they are the excellent medium of the non-verbal storytelling. In this paper, we'll be discussing about the murals discovered in the Lakshmi Narayan temple from the village of Bantipre. This is the depiction of the murals. The Dattatreya, Kalya Mardana, Ganpati, Venugopala, and Rama Hanumanapet. This is the first mural of the Dattatreya. This is the actual mural and the digital sketch. The mural of Dattatreya has been illustrated on the lower left side. The Guru Charitra, the basic religious text of the modern Dattatreya cult. The Dattatreya Sampradaya started to gain prominence in particularly in Maharashtra. Dattatreya can be identified by its three heads, often considered as Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, has been surrounded by animals including cattle and dogs. He is depicted with six hands holding a gada, pustika, trishula, and his left hands is shown holding a kamandalu, an identified object, and the shankha. Dattatreya is depicted wearing a saffron colored uttariya, yajna pavita, also can be observed. This is the depiction depicted standing near the water body, the tree, and the surroundings. This could be the Krishna River where Dattatreya believed to live his life. Dattatreya is often depicted with the four dogs, considered the four Vedas, and a Kamadhenu, the celestial wish fulfilling cow. This is the second mural, the Kalia Mardana, and this is a digital sketch of this mural. And this depiction is inspired from the one of the Krishna Leela, specifically the episode of Kalia Mardana. This episode find the mention in the 16th chapter of the 10th skanda of the Bhagavad Purana. Also in the chapter of 11th, 12th of the Vishnu Parva of the Harivamsha. The stories goes like the Kalia venomous snakes appear in the Yamuna river, making its river poisonous and unsafe to consume. It mitigates this situation. Krishna leaps into the river and brawls with the Kalia. Ultimately, Krishna emerged victorious and is seen dancing on his hood. In the center of the painting, Krishna can be seen dancing on the hood of the Kalia. Kalia is depicted as a giant five-headed serpent residing in the Yamuna River on the left. The mountains-like structure visible, which might be depiction of the Govardhana Parvata. On the right, cattle can be seen gazing on the bank. One interesting detail is note that the presence of the solitary tree nearby, which is the cattle, is shown gazing. In all probability, this tree is Kadamba tree. According to lore, no bird's animal's tree was able to withstand the seeping poison except one Kadamba tree which stands tall. The Krishna is depicted as a child with a prabhaval behind his head, representing the divinity. He is depicted wearing a mukuta with peacock feather on the top. He is also depicted wearing some sort of uttariya. Additionally, Krishna is adorned with the various type of jewelry, which include hara on the neck, bazu banda on the arms, and the kankana on his wrist, and a padavalaya on a leg. This is the third mural, the Ganapati. Ganpati is shown seated on the visual throne. Ganpati is depicted with four arms. On his right hand, depicted in a Abhaya Mudra. Upper right hand, the top left, and the bottom hand shown is holding a Lekhani, a Pasha, and his own tusk, respectively. Mushak can be also seen seated near the left leg. Ganpati is depicted wearing a dhoti, saffron currant katha. He is also depicted wearing a bejeweled mukut with a jewelry dangling on his forehead. Ganpati depicted wearing a big bai on his right earlobe, which is common ornament consists of a gold ring set with a pearls and pendant hanging on the upper lobe of the right ear. During the Maratha period, it was worn by scholars and high-ranked nobles. He is also depicted wearing a muktahara, a pearl necklace, and a kankana on his wrist. The faint line of the Yajna is visible. This is the fourth mural, the Venugopala and the digital sketch. In this mural, Krishna is depicted in his Venugopala form. In the form where Krishna depicted playing flute and standing cross-legged posture of Venugopala in a Vibhanga position. He is depicted wearing a tiara type crown with a single peacock feather in the middle. Venugopal adorned with many type of jewelries. He is depicted wearing a bezeled kantika and a muktahara on his neck. He is also depicted wearing a bazubanda kankana. Venugopal seems to be wearing a pitambara, usually depicted with the cattle around. Even though the murals is highly deteriorated, there does not appear to be a depiction of the cattle around the Venugopal. This is the fifth mural, the Rama Hanumana Beta. This mural illustrates episode of Rama Lakshmana meeting Hanumana. This mural is inspired by the scene from a Kishkinda Kanda of Valmiki Ramayana. In this scene, Hanuman is depicted seated on his knees and touching the feet of Rama in devotion. Right next to Hanumana, his Gada can be placed on the ground. Rama is standing in front of Hanumana and both hands on his head, giving the blessings or Ashirvada to the Hanuman. Lakshman is depicted standing right next to the Ram. In this mural, there's a depiction of the tree in the back and some sort of reeds right behind these characters. The location could be identified as a Pampa Sarovar. It said that the first meeting between Rama and Hanuman happened on the bank of the Pampa Sarovar. The Rama is depicted with a tunira on his back and a dhanush or bow is on his right shoulder. Both his hand on the head of Hanuman. Rama is depicted with a bluish skin tone and wearing a pitambara. Rama is adorned with a tiara, mukuta, with jewel dangling on both sides. Rama is depicted wearing a channavira on his chest. The term channavira refers to the chain worn by both male and female deities. It is made up of two chains crossed over the chest, a disc cover a front crossing. It is set of two scared cords similar of a Yajna Pavita, which one is placed over one shoulder cross of the chest and back and looping, represent a valor of and might. Additionally, Rama is depicted wearing a hara in his neck, bazubanda around there's a depiction of the Lakshmana standing beside the Rama. He is depicted holding a dhanush in his left hand. On the right hand, he is holding a multiple banners. Like Rama, he is not depicted with the bluish skin color. In term of the ornament, depict a similar manner of the Ram. In term of the ornament, Lakshmana is shown wearing a kantika and hara on his neck. He is also depicted wearing a bazubanda and a kankan on his biceps and wrist, respectively. Hanumana is depicted kneeling in front of Rama. He is also touching the feet of the Rama in devotion. Hanuman is wearing a saffron color uttariya. Hanuman is depicted wearing various ornaments similar to Lakshmana and Lakshmana. Hanuman is depicted wearing a tiara like a mukut. He is also depicted wearing a kantika hara on his neck, bazubanda and padavala observation. The most effective method of non-verbal communication is represented by these murals. Its addition to adding the temple's aesthetic appeal. The placement act the medium of storytelling, characters and stories from the epics and the Puranas inspiration of this murals. The clothes worn by personalities of the murals closely resembles to the design and styles of the contemporary period. This contained the representation of the clothes, such as a dhotara and comparable clothing. Additional, these figures have been seen wearing a variety of jewelry, such as a hara, bazubanda, and big bale, which are the Maratha period local design patterns. The murals from the temples feature the depiction of the natural imaginary and scenery, including the vegetations, forestry, and the landforms, which such as hill terrain, plateaus, etc. Not only the water bodies, including the river or the represent. This very much attend of the influence of popular pre-existing from the art temple through the minor difference between the murals at the Bantivre from the painting collection of the Raja Ravi Verma. This include use of ornaments, etc. This mural is depicted relatively clear. This have the started fade and deteriorate. This probably due to the high level of precipitations and the humidity. These murals need conservation and restorations. Even these murals are the part of history. It is challenging to determine their precise date due to a lack of corroborative evidence. However, some of the relative dating techniques can be used determine their historicity with some degree of precision. In this instance, the encompasses of the comparative and stylistic evolution of these murals. For example, many of these murals show stylistic resemblance from the painting of Raja Ravi Verma. Thus, can be presumed that this painting could be belong to the second half of the 19th century to the early of the 20th century. C. This is the bibliography. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Janvi Ambulkar, for such a nice presentation. You have brought to light to our attention, to the attention of the larger community, such a temple that a lot of us did not know about, and it's mural painting. Thank you so much. Now, the next speaker, Dr. Soham Bhande and Preeti Kumari, to make their presentation, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Soham Bhande. I'm from Sathe College, Mumbai University, with my co-author Preeti Kumari from Delhi University. So, topic of our research is reuse sacred forms, an archaeological study of composite Jain icons and temples in context of Jain temple, Koge, Kolhapur. So, now introduction. The Jainism in Deccan and Kolhapur. So, Jainism flourished in Deccan through merchants, royal patronage, especially in medieval Maharashtra. In Kolhapur region, the Kolhapur region formed a part of active network of Jain religious and settlements activity. Many Jain temples survive in this region today. Like for example, Lakshmi Sen Mutt from Kolhapur as well as Bahubali temple from Ichalkaranji, Kolhapur. There are many Jain structures and temples present in which survive today in Kolhapur. Some in fragmentary as well as some which are currently being used today. The concept of composite iconography. The composite iconography refers to images formed through combination of fragments from multiple original sculpture. Such icon possesses the reuse, repair, and adaptation rather than ideal canonical production. They demonstrate how sacred meaning is maintained even though there is material transformation. Now, the context of Jain temple of Koge. The Jain temple at Koge is a ruined medieval structure located near Kolhapur, around 16 kilometers from the city center. It houses a central Tirthankara image that appears to be recomposed composite sculpture. The site provides a key case for understanding the concept of composite iconography as well as reuse and ritual continuity in Deccan. Now, the conceptual framework. What is reuse? The reuse refers to the continued use of sacred objects and spaces after damage, displacement, or even collapse, including practices like restoration, reinstallation, and rearrangement of sculptural elements. It reflects a priority on maintaining a sacred presence rather than preserving just the original form. Now, sacrality. Sacredness is not dependent on just physical perfection, but on the continued ritual engagement. Even a damaged or altered image retains its religious significance within the community. So, meaning is sustained through worship, memory, and cultural continuity. Now, compositeness. The compositeness refers to the formation of images using the parts from different original sculpture. It is often result of practical responses to damage, loss, or availability of fragments. Composite icons reveal adaptive strategies within the lived religious and material contexts. Now, aims and objectives of our research. The primary aim of our research is to analyze the central Tirthankara image at the Koge and identify its composite nature, as well as to study the composite iconography of the Jain temples, which is seen in the region of Deccan as well as Kolhapur and Karnataka. Another objective is to examine the reuse of sculpture fragments within the temple context, and lastly to understand how ritual continuity is maintained despite of damage and recomposition. Now, our research methodology. So the studies based on the field were conducted at Koge as well as Boguli and another Jain temple site in near Kolhapur or Karnataka border. It uses iconographic analysis to examine stylistic features and structural composition of sculpture, as well as there are many literary sources which were used to study more examples from the region. Now, the site description of Koge temple. The temple is located in Koge village, which is in Taluka Karvir of district Kolhapur, near the banks of Panchanga River. The region is historically linked with the Deccan activity, possibly under Shilara influence. The region around the Koge village uh, comes under the activity of Shilara King Bhoj II, as mentioned in Kolhapur Gazetteer. The king or the Raja Bhoj II, who was a Shilahara king, was actually is often linked with the Jainism as well as a temple built by him in the Kasbabid village, which is neighboring village to this Kogi village, consists of Jain icons and images in it. It's a Mahadev temple, but yet there are many Jain icons present in it. The temple structure in the Koge is a ruined stone temple structure consisting of Garbhagriha and Mandapa. The portions of original flooring and wall layout are still preserved. The superstructure Shikara is collapsed, indicating structural decay over time. The temple currently houses a central seated Tirthankara, along with two attendant figures on its either side, as well as a stone as serving as a pedestal or base. Now, Jain temple, oh, these are some of the images of the temple. Here you can see two attendants at the side of the central Tirthankara, as well as the current surviving structure of the temple. Now, iconographic analysis of the central Tirthankara. The central Tirthankara is shown in Padmasana, seated meditative posture, with some detached expressions. It is shown in a nude, unornamented form, with a key feature, which is a key feature of a Tirthankara representation. A halo Prabhavali and a decorated back slab with trilinear umbrella is present above his head. The image lacks clear identifiers such as Lanshana or Srivatsamar. These absences may be due to the weathering or composite nature of the sculpture. Along with that, a temple fragment has been found near the surrounding of the temple with a small Jaina figure in the meditative position. Now, iconography of attendant figures. Both the attendant figures are uh, flanked with many ornamented. They are heavily ornamented with jewelries and garment. These both figures are identified as chamardharas with a chamar or fly whisk in their hands. The attributes include mukuta, kundala, necklaces, armlets, anklets, and chamara flying wings in their hand. Both the figures show signs of damages, with including missing limbs and surface level erosion. The stylistic differences from central figures suggest that they might belong to some different original sculpture units. Now, the evidence of composite notes. In the central Tirthankara, as you can see in this picture, the head portion and the torso portion are actually two different sculptures which have been attached together. Now, with my interviews with the locals of the villages and the elders, which were around more than 70 to 80 years older, everyone has given the narrative that this temple existed in this form since their time, since their childhood, and even before the generations which describe this temple. So, if we can confirm that this sculpture existed like this. However, you can see the white marks at the neck region. This is actually the cement marks because in 2019 the temple actually collapsed and this sculpture was damaged. At that time, the Jain community in the region came and just attached it with a cement, showing restoration efforts by them. Here you can see clear visible junction between the head and torso, indicating that image is not single or integral sculpture. Variations in carving surface and surface finish suggest that these use different sculptural fragments. This confirms that central figure is composed icon formed through reuse. Now you can also see the parts of shoulder. The head has a part of shoulder to which attached, as well as the torso region has another shoulder to it, which suggests that it is a composite icon. Now, evidence of attendant figure. Now, the attendant figure, in contrast to the main figure, shows completely different stylistic and proportional differences, and also an evidence of separate Sloan stab or and uneven integration suggest independent origins. Both the attendant figures show a different stone slab which have been attached to their back, like those were carved in a different stone slab, and not in the same as the central Tirthankara. Their placement alongside the main figure indicates a reassembly of multiple sculptural elements into one ensemble. Now over to you, Preeti.
Thank you, Soham. So, coming to the comparative analysis, so archaeological evidences from regions such as present-day Karnataka and southern Maharashtra demonstrate that sacred spaces are not always preserved in their original or untouched form. Instead, they often survive through processes of reuse. This means that the parts of the temples, sculptures, and icons are reused, rearranged, and sometimes even reinterpreted over time, resulting maybe the term as composite icons. It is important to note that such practices were not confined to a single religion tradition. The reuse of sacred spaces and iconography elements is observable across Jain and non Jain contexts, indicating a broader pattern of cultural adaptations and continuity within the region. Another example is found at the Bhogoli village in Kolhapur district, where a Jain temple dedicated to Parshvanath presents a significant iconography inconsistency. The pedestal of the image feature is a lion motif which is conventionally associated with Mahavira rather than Parshvanath. Furthermore, a mismatch in scale and structure's integration between the icon and its base suggests that the pedestal may not be originally belongs to the present image. This indicates a likely case of recomposition through the reuse of sculpture fragments. This raises an important question: does the pedestal originally belongs to this image? When we also observe the difference in scale and structural alignment between the icon and the base, it is strongly suggests that the pedestal and the image were originally separated and later combined. In other words, what we are seeing here is a composite icon created through the reuse of sculpture elements. Another example comes from the Nagana temple at Lakhundi. Today it is a Shiva temple with a Shivling in the sanctum. However, archaeological evidences show that it was originally a Jain temple dedicated to Parshvanath. Behind the linga will see a carved serpent canopy, a feature closely associated with Parshvanath. What is fascinating here is that while the original Jain image has been removed, the architecture elements, the serpent hood, and has been retained. The shivling now sits under the serpent canopy, creating a new layer of meaning. Both Parshvanath and uh, Shiva are associated with the snakes, and this shared symbolism allows the sacred spaces to be reinterpreted rather than completely replaced. This shows that the sacredness does not appear when an object is reused. Instead, it adopts and acquires new interpretations. Coming to the discussion part. So, in this section, I'll be discussing how the composite nature of Jain icons at Koge, along with the reuse of sacred spaces, challenges our conventional understanding at Jain art and iconography. Traditionally, Jain iconography is governed by a highly structured Silk Shastra guideline. A canopial image of Tirthankar is expected to follow a specific norm, a mediative posture, elongated proportions, and the presence of identifying features such as Shrivat marks and Lanchan. They are further complemented by the Ashtapratihāras such as throne, halo, and umbrella, chauri bearers, celestial musics, and auspicious surroundings. Attendant deities like Yaksh and Yakshis are also typically included, reinforcing the completeness and the symbolic integrity of the image. In this context, it is important to distinguish between two related processes that Soham had mentioned, that is the reuse and recycling. So, reuse refers to the continued use of sacred objects or a space after destruction. This may include the reconstruction of temples, restoration of damaged image icons, or reoccupation of sacred sites. Recycling, on the other hand, involves the breaking down of objects into their material components and transforming them into a new form, such as recasting metals icons or reusing stone fragments in new constructions. According to Richard H. Davis, contends that in Indian context, religious images are dynamic entities that are animated through continual ritual engagements, through daily rituals or devotions, attendance, attentions, and upkeep an image views as a living presence regardless of physical changes. In the term of iconography in a temple's architecture, the Kogi Jain temples exhibit several non-canonical features, including the absence of a proper pedestal with the image placed directly on a stone slab. The central Tirthankar lacks both Srivats and Lanchan, and attendant figures display stylistic differences, enabling a composite structure. Nevertheless, the site continues to be regarded as a sacred by both the Jain community and the local villages. These examples, like Bogoli, that the pedestal mismatch, Lakundi, the Parshanath with Shivlings, also provide evidences to argue that this was not just an isolated case of events, but rather a regional pattern. In conclusion, the study of the Jain temple at Kogi demonstrates that sacred images and space in the Deccan were not static or rigidly bound by canonical perceptions, but were dynamics and responsive to material, social, and ritual content. Through field-based archaeological observations and iconography analysis, the central Tirthankar image has been identified as composite assemblage forms through the integration of multiple sculpture frames through the integration of fragments rather than representing deviations or declines. Such recompositions highlights the process of adaptations, reuse, and continuity within the lived religious practices. In the end, I want to thank the Pleach Foundation for giving us this opportunity. And yeah, thank you so much. These are the references that we followed for our paper.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This ends the presentations by all the scholars, and now we have the opportunity to go through the deliberations and comments and observations on various topics. Dr. Shivangi Naithani Devrani, she invited our attention to a very important but insufficiently studied tradition, manuscript tradition of the Janamsakhi illustrations, and she explained about this lesser known tradition of the Sikh visual tradition and how the illustrations were made. Not just like we are more familiar with like the narrative traditions of Ajanta, like that, and also the narrative schools are there in the Rajasthani and then also in the Mughal, etc. But this is one corpus where the mainstream scholarship has probably not paid sufficient attention. So she explained how this important bulk, which is there in some important collections, and began this illustration tradition from the 17th century, and then in the 18th century and 19th century was much proliferated, and after the printing came, its downfall of the tradition began. But the importance of the whole tradition was very wonderfully highlighted in her presentations. We also learned that the content of those presentations, of those illustrations, were from the teachings of the Guru Nanak Dev, his life, and the companions that were there in his life, and the illustrations from his spiritual quest, and of course the doctrinal themes. The next presentation was by Sri Agroneel Mandal, who also invited our attention to a lesser known corpus of narrative art. At least for my knowledge, both these presentations have been of huge advantage to me personally, and because we all have our own dark areas in our studies, and I was quite amazed to see how wonderful the iconographic identification, the analysis, the interpretation, and what labor has gone into it to make this study. And also the importance of this study becomes all the more valuable because the mural itself are so endangered, and definitely for the larger conservation community and scholarly community and those who are in charge of the management of the temple, perhaps more attention is required to preserve these wonderful paintings. So this one, the Galtaji murals, they enhance and they widen our understanding about the Jaipur art tradition. Next presentation was by Dr. Raghunath Bokil and Janhavi Ambulkar, and they invited our attention to this again. If we talk about the mainstream art historical scholarship, at least I was not very much aware about this particular temple in Ratnagiri, and where there were murals of Dattatreya Sampradaya, and the researchers have again taken pain to identify the iconography of the subject, and so that was also very interesting. Although I think more research is required, perhaps, to align these studies with the how important they are in the larger larger context of Indian art. So perhaps that bottom line is also required somewhere to emphasize the significance of the study. And the last presentation was by Dr. Soham Bhande and Preeti Kumari, and they invited our attention towards this in Kolhapur, in the place called Koge. We had this Jain temple in a dilapidated state that of course requires attention from the authorities, and they also invited our attention to the Jain iconography and Jain settlement over there, and the art and architecture over there, and how Miss Preeti compared the iconography of Koge temple with that of other sites, for example, Bhogoli and Lakundi. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention.